reading the statement. Minister, over to you.
Is it on?
Yes, it is.
Thank you, Ishmael. Let me start by, before I read the statement, just to greet and welcome MEC Grant. Donald Grant, MEC for Transport and Public Works from the Western Cape, as well as the officials who are joining me here. Did you introduce them?
No, Minister. I thought you, as you read the statement, you.
Oh, okay. You are delegating upwards. That's what happens on the eve of the elections. And you have to oblige, you know. On my right here, it's Mr. Zola Majav, who is the chairperson of the board of the Road Traffic Management Corporation, which is our main entity that deals with traffic and road safety and related issues. I've already introduced the MEC Grant from the Western Cape, and then our Acting Director General, Mr. Chris Hlabisa, Department of Transport. And then Advocate Msibi Makosini is the name, first name. Advocate Msibi is the CEO of the Road Traffic Management Corporation. Indeed, there are other CEOs that I'm seeing here. I've seen one from RAF. I'm not so sure. There may be others as well. And also representatives from our other entities, especially those that have got a much more immediate interest on the issue of road safety. Let me then thank everyone who is present here, the officials from the various departments, including the South African Police Service, who on this matter in particular are our biggest allies. We appreciate that, Ingalo Mthetho. Now, and members of the media were here. We have come, I'll read the statement, after which, of course, as usual, we will field questions. We have come together a day after the commemoration of the International Workers' Day, popularly known as May Day, which is the day that we, amongst other things, celebrate the role played by workers and other organizations associated with workers. And MEC Grant won't take offense that one of the organizations associated with the workers is the South African Communist Party. They were celebrating all of them yesterday. Celebrating also the role of workers in our country in the struggle against apartheid. Today, as we officially release the 2019 Easter Road Safety Report, we also must remember the impact of road carnages, especially to the poor and the working class. They are not the only ones, but usually the numbers are bigger on their side, and also the impact tends to be bigger amongst the poor and the working class, because they are that section of society that also gets disproportionately affected. Although as government we care about everyone to be safe on our roads. We held our Easter Road 2019 Easter Road Safety Campaign under the theme of Arrive Alive. As we all know, the Easter period is characterized by increased traffic volumes with travels to work, leisure, and other pilgrimages. Sometimes what people are not aware of is that the Easter weekend is often is tougher to deal with from a traffic point of view than the festive season, because the festive season stretches for 4 weeks, for some people maybe 5 weeks. Easter weekend is just everybody on the road on almost a single day, which is a Thursday. And of course, it would be spread throughout the Easter weekend, but we are talking 4 days in essence. So it's an extremely challenging period, especially from the point of view of those of us who are given the responsibility to manage traffic on our roads. It therefore makes sense that we align our road safety activations and law enforcement operations with the traveling patterns of our population. Consequently, our preliminary report covers the period 18 April to 22nd April 2019. Although I must say, we had already issued a statement about fatalities and injuries this past Easter weekend, what we are doing today is to give a much more detailed picture of the statistics and what happened over the last Easter weekend, because there are other matters that we haven't spoken about, which we think are important to share with the population as a whole in our country, especially those who are road users. In one way or the other, all of us are road users. In an effort to curb the road carnages, the law enforcement agencies came together and conducted operations and increased visibility on the roads. Amongst other offences, we particularly targeted drunken driving, pedestrian behaviour, driver and vehicle fitness. Doesn't mean we didn't deal with the others, but also we had to prioritize, given often the role of these factors in road crashes. I am pleased to announce that the number of fatalities decreased by 48%, from 309 in 2018 to 162 in 2019. This marks a decrease of 147 in terms of fatalities. However, we must say that as government, we are still concerned even if a single life is lost on our roads. We would like ideally that our roads become as safe as possible. All provinces recorded decreases in the number of fatalities. The highest decrease in absolute figures was recorded by Limpopo with 41 fatalities, followed by KwaZulu-Natal with 33 fatalities. We list there the fatalities as per province. Gauteng 16, KwaZulu-Natal 37, Western Cape 18, Eastern Cape 22, Free State 4, Mpumalanga 17, Northwest 13, Limpopo 32, and Northern Cape 3. This year we recorded 128 crashes. Now it's important that I explain this. There is a difference between a crash and a fatality. So when we count these numbers, please don't mix them up. I don't know how to explain a crash other than ngesizulu. Ukushayisana kwemoto. Noma ukushayisa kwemoto, noma ukugingqika kwemoto. It does not necessarily mean that a crash results in fatalities, yet at the same time it's out of crashes that there are fatalities and injuries. So this year we recorded 128 crashes, which also has a 46% decrease as compared to the 238 crashes recorded in 2018. This indicates that there was a decrease of 110 crashes in comparison with the previous Easter period. I am also pleased to report that all provinces, as I have said, recorded decreases in the number of crashes. I congratulate all the MECs, my colleagues, for their dedication to the implementation of our road safety strategy and plans. And I must say, I'm not trying to please MEC Grant, but I'm talking about all our MECs. That since I became Minister of Transport, actually, I've been struck by how cooperative our MECs have been and their commitment that we actually work together as a team. You know, the Department of Transport and all our MECs. That has been very, very pleasing. The province that recorded the highest decreases, as I have said, is Limpopo with 27, followed by KZN, KwaZulu-Natal with 21 crashes. In relation to the major crashes, there were 5 crashes recorded which resulted in 41 fatalities and 28 serious injuries. We are encouraged by the behavior of the majority of motorists and all road users who showed willingness to obey the rules of the road. On behalf of the government, I would like also to send our deepest condolences to the families and friends of those who died on our roads and wish those who were injured a speedy recovery at home or in hospital. Of course, government immediately activated our road accident fund to provide the necessary support and comfort to the affected families. To date, we have issued 84 funeral support activations at an average of 22,200 cost rent, 22,200 rand cost per funeral. I must be careful now the speed with which I read English or MSc grant, you know. I made a boo-boo, but it helped actually to bring down, I think it contributed to show how serious I am that as a Minister of Transport, I'm now going to test both the levels of alcohol in the blood as well as the levels of blood in the alcohol. And then you see now there's been a decrease, because that actually showed that we will leave no stone unturned.
Well said, Minister.
Yes, absolutely, everything now, Ishmael. To this extent, we've spent a total of 1.9 million rand from the 1st of April 2019. Beyond the funeral services, the Road Accident Fund will still be there to ensure that post-crash care support is provided for both the injured and families of the deceased where appropriate. I know MSc and our acting DG may think that I'm out of order, but I must say this, that the role that is played by the Road Accident Fund, despite the enormous challenges that institution is facing in terms of pressures on it, it's something that is really to be appreciated by South African society. And the Road Accident Fund is funded through petrol levy. I know all South Africans, and we understand as government, are complaining about the price of fuel. We all wish that we bring down the price of fuel. But let's not then in the process think that by reducing the amount of levy for the Road Accident Fund, that's going to solve our problems, because it's playing a very important role in bringing some level of comfort and assistance, especially in a country that has got such huge numbers of road crashes, fatalities and injuries. Now, here is another important factor, that the total number of registered vehicles from the 31st of March 2018 to the 31st of March 2019 increased by 248,354. In absolute numbers, that's huge, by the way. Although it's 2.02%, but in absolute numbers, that's huge. That increase marked an increase of vehicles on South Africa's roads from 12,293,212 to 12,541,566 vehicles on our roads. A total number of vehicles stopped for Easter period 2019 was 177,182, which has an increase of about 27,079 compared to the previous year, where 150,103 vehicles were stopped. In 2019, we stopped 161,784 vehicles as compared to 119,771 in 2018. Over and above notices issued, a total of 1,343 arrests were effected in 2019 as compared to 1,598 in 2018. Now, 807 drivers were arrested for drunken driving. The highest alcohol readings were reported in Gauteng, and we provide the details there in our statement as to the levels. Highest level was Gauteng, followed by Western Cape, Limpopo, and Mpumalanga. Now, to continue to clamp down on offences on our roads, 192 drivers were arrested for speeding. The province with the highest speed recorded was Gauteng at 203 kilometers per hour, followed by Western Cape at 202 kilometers per hour, then Gauteng again at 197 kilometers per hour, followed by the Free State at 183 kilometers per hour. Just by way of some detailed information, a passenger was arrested in Brooklyn, Pretoria, for offering a 200 rands bribe to traffic officers who were arresting his brother for being above the alcohol limit. By the way, since I became Minister of Transport, MEC Grant, sometimes I get phoned by people, who happened, some of them, to get my number, midnight, being stopped by the police, being arrested. And I've learned now to develop a tough attitude. Don't call me if you are arrested and you have actually violated the rules of the road. It's very important. Now, we intend to be harsher with law enforcement officers. I want to say this. The ones who take bribes, as this undermines all our efforts in curbing road crashes, injuries and fatalities. And also those who do this, they tarnish the image of the good law enforcement officers. Again in Mpumalanga, the National Public Order Police member was charged with negligent handling of an official firearm, which the National Traffic Police officers found it lying under his car seat. We're making this because also we want to illustrate that many of our law enforcement officers are doing well, but those who are doing badly, we need to act. We need to act. And I can see the general from SAPS is nodding and agreeing with me. Our law enforcement officers were on alert and arrested 139 drivers who were driving without operating permits, 29 without driver's licenses, 22 with false documentation, and 79 with warrants of arrest, 25 for reckless and negligent driving. These arrests and offences issued were as a result of joint operations, I must say, conducted between provincial authorities, the South African Police Service, and all other stakeholders involved in the operations of law enforcement. The period was characterized by the following major incidents, which were recorded as from the 18th to the 22nd of April this year. Not 20, those were our statement, not 2018. It's supposed to be 2019. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
Ishmael, you are the last one to make me make another poo-poo now. There were 3 major crashes reported and investigated which contributed to 23 fatalities and 8 serious injuries. 10 of these crashes took place in Limpopo, 5 in KZN and 8 in the Western Cape. The preliminary reports show that the main contributory factors to road crashes are related to human behavior, particularly human recklessness. Continues to be a big issue, this. In 2019, in terms of our own measurements, the human factor contributed 91% to the crashes, a decrease of 3%, but nevertheless still very high. The roads and environmental factors as causes of crashes increased by 1.7% from 5.5% in 2018 to 7.2% in 2019. They increased by 1.7 percentage points. if I am to read this correctly, given my arithmetic that I did under battery education, Advocate Master. Tire burst remains a major contributor to road crashes. In 2019, tire burst increased astronomically by 100% as opposed to 82% in 2018. And this translates to an increase of 18 percentage points in tire burst-related incidents during the 2019 Easter period. Male drivers contributed 72% in crashes, which is a 10 percentage point increase from the 62%. We need to correct that. In 2018. Female drivers recorded 15% in road crashes, a decrease of 9 percentage points as compared to 24% in 2018. Now, this is very important, by the way. It's very important, that male drivers continue to be the more serious violators of the rules. Despite the significant increase in female drivers, but the rate is going down insofar as female drivers are concerned. No one can disagree today that almost in South African roads, I notice this sometimes, almost 1 out of every 3 cars between Tshwane and Johannesburg is a woman driver. In other instances, it's 2 out of 3. But there is actually a decrease. Now, during this period, pedestrians accounted for 24% in crashes, which is a decrease of 6 percentage points from 30% in 2018. Crashes relating to passengers decreased to 36.8% in 2019 from 38.6% in 2018. We're talking about fatalities here, where it's passengers or pedestrians. Now, single vehicle overturns contributed 24%, an increase of 3 percentage points compared to 21% in 2018. The vehicle types that contributed the highest to crashes were motor cars and light delivery vehicles. However, motor vehicles recorded a decrease of 17 percentage points from 47% in 2018 to 30% in 2019. Light delivery vehicles also decreased from 22% in 2018 to 13% in 2019. The minibus taxis contributed 6% to the crashes. Further analysis indicates that Easter Friday in 2019 contributed 24%, Easter Saturday 30%, and Sunday 21% to the crashes. So Saturdays were the bad days, Saturday of the Easter weekend. There was also a significant increase observed between 3 and 4 in the afternoon and 7 and 8 in the evening, respectively. We will have to go into more detail as we look into these patterns. Of course, not just over 1 year, but acting DG, that's one thing, and now about Machab. We need to do over a period as part of research that we need to do seriously. Maybe some academic institutions, I'm sure they are doing that, something that we need to study closely, and some of it we should actually be communicating it to the public, insofar as it helps us to deal or to confront the scourge of road crashes in our country. South Africa subscribes to the modern global approach to road safety, known as the Safe Systems approach, which recognizes that we can best achieve our objectives to reduce fatalities by integrating safer roads, safer vehicles, more effective post-crash responses, and sustained education and awareness campaign. But I must say, this is not me alone, and all the MECs were agreed that we really do need to tighten action against transgressors. There is absolutely no other way. I was telling my colleagues earlier that on Monday, I was at Sun City to an international congress of an automobile association. It's got a French name. And the president of that international organization was telling me, he's from Paris, that in France recently they actually reduced road crashes from road fatalities from just over 19,000 to about 3,500 per annum in recent years. And they said it's tightening the laws and to be tougher. That is very clear that we'll have to do over and above education, much as we do a multi-pronged approach. There are a number of interventions that the Department of Transport implemented in order to achieve reduced number of crashes and fatalities on our roads. We now intend to heighten focus on road safety as a 365 days and 24/7 activity in order to confront the scourge of road fatalities and injuries. We have embraced what are normally today called disruptive, innovative and technological methods presented by the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Amongst these measures, we'll be focusing on the following. Firstly, we will continue to implement or use the evidentiary breathalyzer alcohol testing. That's not the one that will be cheated by a hot cross bun. The 24-hour shift has now started as a second intervention. Provinces are urged to plan their 3 shifts for their maximum output to further reduce crashes. It's very clear, it's continuing to have evidence that where you have got visibility of traffic law enforcement officers or other law enforcement officers, we tend to reduce crashes. So we want to continue to do that. I think I must also say that for the first time, the Road Traffic Management Corporation in 2019 is going to recruit 1,000 new traffic officer trainees, which is the highest ever number that we have ever recruited as a country in 1 year. Because we want to chase this thing that we need more traffic law enforcement officers. Also, that will contribute to improving visibility. Another intervention is that through the South African National Roads Agency, SANRA, we have developed innovative interventions in some of the hazardous locations where most of speeding, overloading, and unsafe driver behavior persist. For instance, on the N1 in Polokwane, between Kranskop, N1 to Polokwane, from here, between Kranskop and Polokwane, we are going to be separating the lanes there so that we minimize this thing that we have got 2 lanes right next to each other going different directions. If anyone just moves over the other lane, then you hit the other traffic for whatever reason. People are not supposed to do that. So these are some of what we call engineering interventions. We will also continuously make road surfaces safer through engineering solutions and interventions, both in the construction of new road projects and into the upgrading and rehabilitation of existing roads. Since I became Minister of Transport, I hope I will be protected. I've been subject to some serious abuse on Facebook. This morning I was sent a photo of someone who is sitting in the middle of a road and fishing in a pond that is in the middle of a road. That's how big the pothole was. But well, maybe it's a way to remind us that we have to do this, which is what we are committed to. We're also going to be focusing on working together with tire manufacturing companies, vehicle manufacturers, NGOs and research institutions, so that we can be able to focus on, amongst other things, the illegal tire industry. This still continues to be a big problem. We will also intensify work towards collating a database for foreign issued driver's licenses and foreign registered vehicles within the boundaries of South Africa, and strengthening cooperation on road transport within the SADC region. This remains one of our big challenges: the harmonization of road management, road traffic, road safety systems within the SADC region, because there is an increasing traffic within and between the countries that actually make up SADC. We will continue to work with the Department of Basic Education to encourage matric learners to obtain. We will be generating a new cadre of competent drivers. There are some good initiatives that are taking place on this scope. They also encourage getting proper driver's licenses rather than getting or buying fake driver's licenses or paying bribes for genuine driver's licenses. Following President Cyril Ramaphosa's signing of the ARTO Amendment Bill into law, we will immediately introduce the points demerit system. This system will allow us to identify, rehabilitate, and ultimately eliminate habitual offenders found on our road transport network. You can't just as a driver really get into a vehicle drunk and then you get involved in an accident, you wipe out a family, as MEC Grant was saying as we were talking earlier, and then you walk away. If you look at some, for instance, even if when you look at things like speeding, there's this example that we were talking about earlier of someone who was doing 203 kilometers per hour in a Gauteng road and gets a bail of 1,000 rand. It's like it's an incentive really that you are giving that person. So we are going to be working very hard together with the criminal justice cluster to ensure that people who do these things must just not get away with this. And that is the only way that people will actually begin to take these things seriously. And we are going to be implementing the points demerit system. Working together with the National Anti-Corruption Unit and the Directorate for Priority Crime Investigations, we will continue to arrest traffic officers who, instead of issuing fines for traffic violations, demand gratification or bribes for motorists. We will also continue to crack down on corruption and the fraudulent issuing of driver's licenses and roadworthy certificates. As the National Department of Transport, we call upon all our provinces that we work collaboratively to tackle this matter. The reclassification of the more serious road traffic offences like drunken driving to Schedule 5 of the Criminal Procedure Act will continue to receive high priority in our endeavour and quest for a mandatory minimum sentence for drunken driving inconsiderate, reckless, and negligent driving. The National Department of Transport will also start in earnest to work towards a single national database for all traffic offences in order to facilitate traffic law enforcement generally, and particularly for purposes of implementing the points demerit system. We need to move with speed, Acting Director General Hlabisa, on this. This thing is completely unacceptable that when I check my offences, traffic offences, in KZN, when I'm in KZN on the road, they can only pick up KZN offences. They can't pick up offences committed in Cape Town or Johannesburg or Bloemfontein or Rustenburg. It's a problem. We need, as a matter of agency, to know when we catch you and we check all your offences from all over the country must be able to show. And hopefully also if you committed some offences beyond South Africa. I want to categorically state that improving safety is not the responsibility of government alone. And road safety, would like to continue to say, is everyone's responsibility. So I call upon all South Africans to take responsibility when using our roads. And that's why we appreciate the media's presence. Because we would really like to forge a partnership. Maybe much more concrete and beyond just press briefings. But working with the media on this very important matter. As I conclude, I want to say that as South Africans collectively and severally, we fought a good fight, did our very best, and triumphed over adversity posed by road crashes and fatalities this time around of the Easter period. Though, as I have said, we would ideally not want to lose even a single soul on our roads. Although we have significantly reduced our crashes and fatalities on our roads, we can still do more to eradicate this calamity. Let me take this moment to commend once more our MECs, the mayors, the South African Local Government Association, our traffic law enforcement officers, members of the South African Police, emergency medical personnel, doctors and nurses who maintained high levels of visibility as well as dedication to their work on and off the roads throughout the Easter period. A word of gratitude also goes to all the fraternal organizations who undertook various campaigns to raise awareness about road safety across the country, including many NGOs, by the way, who are doing some good work. And we would like to urge NGOs as well to continue to act like some of the good NGOs and seek to be partners and not just be shouting at government only all the time. It's not very helpful. Yes, we want to be criticized, but to be standing in order to prove to whoever is contributing to your NGO that you continue to do work by shouting at government does not help at the end of the day. We would like to have a much more cooperative relationship, and our doors are open as government for all our NGOs to come and be partners rather than sparring partners. In thanking those who have participated in our effort on road safety, we would like to include many youth faith-based organizations and organizations of people with disabilities, the taxi industry, the bus industry, Coca-Cola, Drive Dry, Brand SA, SAB Miller, as well as our sister departments that we work closely with, the Lifeline Outreach Program, Vodacom, Total Garage, and Sasol Garage. Now, we would like to say that also, we really call upon all of the private sector to partner with us. We still are of the view that the private sector has an important role to play. There are also those parts of the private sector that have got a direct interest here, like the insurance industry. And MEC Grant, as you know, I'm very passionate about the use of science, technology, and innovation in dealing with, amongst other things, road safety problems. We would like the private sector to work together with government in our development of innovation hubs for road transport in particular, so that we are able to find technology solutions to our problems. Of course, the human factor we also have to deal with, but we also have to do all we can to improve the situation in our roads. Lastly, I call upon all of you to go out in numbers to exercise your democratic rights by voting on the 8th of May 2019. I would be irresponsible if I don't say so, because every good and patriotic South African must go out and vote. So you do both things: drive safely and vote. Now, I say this also that we must always remember that our freedom was never free, by the way. It was sealed in the blood of many freedom fighters and other casualties in our struggle for liberation. So it's important that we value their contribution by making our roads safer, and to go and vote on the 8th of May. Sorry, this was a bit of a longish statement, but we thought that we needed to share these details with you, because it's of no use to keep these. As some very well-known philosopher used to say, if you have got important information, don't keep it under your pillow, because change in society is not going to happen from under your pillow. So we must always share information. That's what we are trying to do, and that's our responsibility as a transparent government. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll go to the second part of our media briefings, where the focus will be on the question and answer session, questions of clarity from the statement. Later on, you'll also be given an opportunity to participate. I'll start here in Pretoria. Yes, ma'am. Just state your name and the organization that you represent and the question. Thank you.
Afternoon, Minister. It's Leranzo Temba from ENCA. Congratulations on this very impressive decrease. But I think the question that maybe, the first question that popped up into my mind, really, was it not for the fact that there probably were less cars on the roads? I know that the Easter weekend did not necessarily fall at the end of the month, but in case you did answer that, please forgive me, but you mentioned this 12 million cars that were registered. Is that the amount of cars that were on our roads, or just generally registered? Because I just wanted to find out, is it not essentially the fact that there's just less people that were traveling, and people not necessarily being able to afford drinking as they usually would because of the dire economic times? And just on the 24-hour police visibility, you mentioned 1,000 more officers that are going to be employed. I mean, how sustainable is it to have 24-hour police officers on the roads, and which roads would that be, without obviously giving away too much information where people would, avoid those roads? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Hello, Minister. Sakine Gazan, News. I have two questions for you. The first one is the criminal justice cluster. Do you think they are letting you down? And if so, how are you going to intervene? Because you guys get the culprits on the road and then hand them over to the justice system. Do you think they're imposing stronger sentences towards them? And secondly is the breathalyzer. You spoke about a very specialized breathalyzer that's going to bypass the hot cross spine. How different is this breathalyzer? in fact, how, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir?
My name is Johnny Sai. I'm with African News Agency. Just for clarity, when you do your analysis on the stats, what's the biggest factor you can attribute for the 48% decline? What have you said this could be your factor which caused this major decline? What do you attribute it to? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir, the panel.
Yes, thank you. Well, the Eyewitness News. Minister, just a few points of clarification. When you talk about Schedule 5 and trying to negligence and also these offences, how will you come up to that? What will be the taking factor with reckless driving, people driving under alcohol? How will you get to those factors? Will it be forensic or trying to schedule this as a Schedule 5 offence? Because it could be difficult to know that Jacob Humphreys was let off as after being committed murder of those kids in Cape Town. It was reduced again to 8 years as negligent driving. So what steps will you take to make sure that it stays as murder as the way you charge it? It will not be reduced in courts as we see in Jacob Humphrey's case. And number two, when you talk about the ARTO system being implemented, the president is signing through, it's been coming ever since I was an intern journalist. It's been 7 years now. There's still, where are we with that? Because the democratic system, because you say that the president is signed into law, but what exactly happens now? Is there a time frame when this democratic system will come? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't get the name, sorry. Bonga. Oh, okay,
Bonga,
sorry.
please.
Yes, Bonga. No, Bengazwanga put.
I will give to the minister
Yeah.
and the MEC to respond.
Maybe let me start, MEC, unless you want to. You feel free to come in. We'll call upon the officials to come in where they think it's necessary. I hope I picked up all the questions well. I also have another challenge that I must disclose around you, that sometimes I can't read my own handwriting. That's why I often call it hieroglyphics. No, we're talking about the cars that are moving, am I right, at that time, on our roads, the 12 million plus. Because I think the total number of vehicles in South Africa are much more than that.
12.5.
The total number of vehicles, yes, it's 12.5. Okay, let me correct that. You know, it's because I'm confused in my head, because when I met a few years ago with the vehicle dealers, they told me that for the first time from 2020 they're gonna hit selling 1 million new vehicles just in 1 year, next year, in South Africa. This is the total number of vehicles that we have on our roads. But it's a good question that we are asking as to maybe what percentage we should try to establish would be moving at that particular point in time. We don't have that unless our experts may actually be having that. Now, you are saying how sustainable is 24/7. Well, maybe the answer partly relates to the second part of your question. Because 24/7, of course it can't be 24/7 in every road, or even in every major road for that matter. But we have identified the most hazardous roads in our country, and also what one may call the most hazardous times. We know that. And that is what we want to increase law enforcement officers primarily around, where there is lots of movement of traffic. If we do that, we think that we can be able to sustain that, because we've also put in place other measures. For instance, we welcome the fact that my colleague, the Minister of Public Service and Administration, has waived restrictions on the payment of overtime for traffic law enforcement officers beyond the 30% that's allowed in the public service, so that we are able to sustain and to maintain this 24/7 activity on our roads. So we identify those. We don't necessarily want to hide our roads, you know. Most hazardous roads, we normally talk about them. N1 between here and Bulugwane, for instance, is one. The N3, part of the N1, they are also a problem, just like parts of the N3. And others, they may not be the national highways, you know, which are also very, very, very problematic. There is one road that everybody has been telling me about, for instance, called Wasata in the Eastern Cape. It's at the Devil's Place. Precisely, it's named after that because of the number of deaths that are there. But I've been told, acting DG, that we've not done much to actually tackle Wasata from an engineering point of view as well. So we do know about that. By the way, you know, without taking much time, I was struck when I was in a roadblock in Pietermaritzburg over the Easter weekend that there is now a machine that sits in the car of a law enforcement officer, which you can park anywhere and be able to pick up the speed. My own sense, acting DG, I hope I'm not wrong and I hope I'm not out of order. I'm not so sure to what extent we are fully mobilizing that. Because truly speaking now, there is no need for even a visible roadblock or setting up a speed with a camera, you know, and so on. Then other drivers, they start flickering others, which is wrong, by the way, to say that there is a speed trap ahead or a camera. If you can sit in the vehicle, you can even follow traffic and be able to pick up cars that are speeding and be able to tell your colleague somewhere in front, stop car so and so and car so and so. So technology now, including the one that is in KZN and Cape Town, which calculates the average speed between distances, that if you were at point A at this time and you were at point B at this time, it means you were doing 160 kilometers per hour. Then it means you must arrest and charge. Technology actually has been fairly advanced, and we do not want necessarily, that's the point I was trying to make, to hide which roads are hazardous, because the population must know, whilst at the same time we aim to capture the culprit. Sakila, I would not say that the JCPS cluster is letting us down. Rather, we want to say to ourselves, we need to do more to engage the cluster, to make sure that the cluster is better informed and the cluster better appreciates the nature of the challenges. That's what we are committing ourselves to do. To engage everyone, including the NPA, you know, including the bench, not to influence them on particular cases, but to better appreciate that these are some of the problems that we are faced with. I wouldn't criticize them. I would rather say we have to do more to engage, and that's what we are committing ourselves to. This breathalyzer is very different, John. I better tell you, so that you know exactly what you would be faced with in case you take chances. Teasing you. You know, now what happens is that when we suspect that you're drunk, we draw blood from you and we send it to a laboratory. Sometimes it can take anything up to 6 months before the results come back. By that time, we have already been found 4 or 5 times more being drunk behind the wheel. And as a result, many of those cases, they don't see the end of light, you know. Now, with this new breathalyzer, we are able to tell you within 10 minutes what's the level of alcohol in your blood. Definitely. So that's quicker, which means if we catch you now, we can make you go and appear in court tomorrow and be able also to deal with your case much quicker than has been the case before. We think that this is a huge advantage in our attempts to fight drunken driving in particular. So that's what is different with this breathalyzer. We don't have to wait for blood tests to come back. You are also asking an important question, Oh, it was Sakile was asking about the breathalyzer. Sorry. Johnny asked about the decline. Look, the decline has been due to a number of factors. Yes, we want to concede that the fact that the Easter weekend was separate from school holidays contributed in lessening the pressure on our roads, which is something that as government we have to look into going forward. Whether is it not ideal that at all times we separate the two? Did contribute. And as a result, the volumes of cars that were on the road were lesser than last year, for instance. But by saying so, we must not also take away from the work that has been done by our law enforcement officers in the provinces and new innovations and focus on more visible policing. That also, that in itself, we would not have brought this down were it not for the fact that this contributed to that. I hope that I'm answering that question. Maybe, I don't know, Advocate Machav, oh, by the way, MCB also is another advocate. You are learned friends. How do we get to Schedule 5? Maybe let me leave that to you, because it sounds like quite sophisticated legally. Bonga, I don't know no more from the because the way you are asking, you are now twisting me. I'm only an ordinary sociologist. I'm struck that you say you were an intern only 7 years ago. You worry me because it means I'm really getting old. I did my internship in 1982. Listen, I'm not saying this as a threat. The points demerit system is coming this time around. Definitely. The law is passed by Parliament for the first time. It's now on the desk of the President. You might have seen me on television yesterday next to the President on May Day in Durban. You're not sure what we may also have been talking about. But the law nevertheless, I don't want to disclose secrets. The law nevertheless now is waiting for the President to sign. And as soon as the President signs, we have already started looking into what are the things that needs to be done in order to be able to implement the points demerit system. And we want to inform all of you, you're going to have 12 points each year. So, when the year starts, we have 12 points. Then we start from there. Depending on how we behave, we start deducting until you hit 0. And when you hit 0, we will then look how serious. You can, by the way, you may hit 0 in one incident. You drank, you wipe out a family. That actually may be equal 12 points. Gone. We suspend you or we take the license from you forever. That you are such a danger to society that you are not allowed to use our roads. We people say this, I think we need to emphasize it. Being on the road as a driver is not a right. We want people to understand it as a privilege, which you must then protect. Because you do not have, whilst you have a right to use our roads, you do not have a right to use our roads in a manner that poses danger. That's what we mean when we say it's not a right. In a manner that poses danger to other users of the road, whether they are in vehicles or they're pedestrians. I don't know, other than the two advocates, whether MEC you want to say something or acting teacher.
Minister, yes, thank you. Obviously, we welcome the decline, but
it's on the side here. Okay, I think I've pressed it.
okay.
Try.
Obviously, we welcome the decline, even though the data could be different as a result of the school holidays and other factors, other technical improvements. But I think also, if I look at this from the Western Cape perspective, if I look at the Easter Road data, 53% was from the metro area, whereas we in the province patrol some 34,000 kilometres of road. So the tie-up and alignment between provincial and local authorities and planning, I think, is very important. And I absolutely endorse that we've got to look at sanctions for drivers, because if you look at the data, 91% of the fatalities are human behavior. So if there's not the deterrent to alter that human behavior, such as the withdrawal of your rights and privileges to drive on our roads, I think that can have a huge effect. And also, another matter I've mentioned to the officials that I think we need to look at is when a driver is involved in a fatal accident, there should be, if the driver survives and once the driver is recuperated, a full investigation into that particular smash and investigate whether there are grounds to withdraw that license for a period of time or an extended period of time, if there's culpability, following a legal process. So that drivers realize that if they are involved in a fatal accident, whether it's their fault or not, that there are going to be consequences. I just think it'll make them far more aware when they're behind the wheel. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Should I not take this to shift? Is that okay? Or am I breaking some journalistic rules? Let's try it this way. Ishmael.
Thank you. It's fine. It's fine. Thank you, Ishmael. Perhaps let me try and simplify the issue pertaining to the scheduling or reclassification of offences. Firstly, the scheduling or reclassification does not in and of itself create new offences. It is aimed at dealing with two issues. Firstly, the ease with which bail is granted to those who are suspected to have committed certain offences. The second issue that is aimed at being dealt with by the reclassification deals with what then happens after you have been found guilty of that particular reclassified offences. It talks to the possible sanctions that are available. So, if and when we do succeed, it would mean if you are found guilty of reckless driving, for example, you will not be automatically admitted to bail either at the police station or on your first court appearance. You will have to spend a minimum number of days from your first appearance before your formal bail application. It is not to say if you are arrested today, you will only appear in court in 7 days. No, the media has been reporting it. Some parts of the media have been reporting it incorrectly. It means like any other citizen, you will be entitled to your first appearance within 48 hours, but at your first appearance, you will not necessarily be entitled to bring a bail application. You would have to wait a minimum of 7 days, just as you would had you been facing charges of murder, rape, aggravated robbery. Ultimately, what then happens to that suspect still becomes a function of the judicial processes. If found guilty, you'll be dealt with in accordance with the applicable sanctions for that particular scheduled offense. If you're not found guilty, you're not found guilty. If the court believes that you are worthy of being admitted to bail, having brought a formal bail application yourself, then you will be released on bail. Let me give you a scenario that says the following. Most of you would remember that previously, people who used to steal copper would be charged with normal theft as if they stole a bottle of water. But because of the serious implications of the consequences of such type of theft, Parliament deemed it necessary to pass a special offence in the form of making it an infrastructure-related charge. So where typically you would have been charged with theft of copper, it has been reclassified to be of a serious nature, still to deal with two things. If you are arrested on suspicion of having stolen copper, which results in the traffic lights not working and so on and so forth, you will be subjected to the same process like any other suspect. However, you will not be released on bail immediately. You will have to first appear, wait out a minimum number of 7 days before you could then bring a formal application yourself and show to the court why you should be released. If you succeed in persuading the court that you should be released on bail, you'll be released on bail. And later on, if it is found that there is evidence that the court finds proves an offense, when sanction is to be handed down at that stage, it will be along the lines of whatever minimum sentence that such a classification would bring about. So that's really the idea here. The idea is to make the judiciary to see that traffic offenses are not just play offenses, that they too are to be treated seriously. Whether it will be murder or culpable homicide, like Sakila was saying, it has to do with the evidence that the court may find that it has been proven before it. With regard to the EBAT system, the minister has already spoken about that, but what is different here? The issue here talks to the admissibility of the evidence as a result of what that machine spews out. Historically, you had to rely on two-pronged approach. You blow into a breathalyzer like they did on that advert of a hot cross bun. It gives you an indicator that you may be drunk. What then happens is that you must now be taken to a police, a hospital or a clinic, and blood be drawn from you within 2 hours. Now sometimes, because of logistics, you don't get to draw blood within 2 hours. And once you miss that 2-hour period, the outcome of that blood examination is not admissible in court, so a person would be entitled to work. So what the EBAT system does, it simply says, if you are found positive as a result of that system, that outcome is admissible in a court of law, which is a huge advantage that this intervention will bring. Sakile, this particular introduction of the EBAT system is actually a product of collaboration between us and justice system and the NPA, because the NPA itself has also issued directives to prosecutors on how to deal with these types of cases. So you no longer have a case of drunken driving being thrown out of the window because prosecutors don't know what to make of it or there is lack of evidence. As a matter of fact, it is precisely because of that collaboration with the justice system that we are able to get to the point where we are at. It's still too early to say as to what significant scores we have gained as a result of this, because the minister only launched it now, I think less than a month ago. So we still have to collect empirical data on the basis of which we'll come back to and say, look, these are the victories that have been gained. And finally, the demerit system. The consultation processes and everything else that we reported on last year have all been concluded. And we're simply awaiting the president to put pen to paper. Once he does that, the e-notice system that is now back within the control of the RTMC will enable us to start monitoring that and talking points. It's like your negative marking scenario. So technologically, in terms of the IR, we are in a state of readiness to start rolling it out. But it is not law yet because the person on whom the executive confers the right to make it into law hasn't signed it yet. But we are almost at the last stage of that 6-year-long journey project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we cross to Cape Town so that we have questions from
towards
us?
closure.
Yes, we do. We've got one from there.
And move towards closure.
Thank you very much, Minister. This is Sofian Lamla from the Cape August newspaper. I would love to ask, where do you source your information? In particular, the fatalities. I know that the Western Cape, the Transport Department in Western Cape, they said they are sourcing their information from the Department of Health Forensic Pathology Services. So I would love to know, where do you source the information, in particular the fatalities? And also another question, why is your statistics, your fatality statistics is not the same as the Western Cape's one? You said on page 4 that in Western Cape there are 18 fatalities, and the Western Cape Department says they have recorded 38. So why? What's wrong with the statistics? It's either the national or the Western Cape. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there further questions in Cape Town?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I have this last question here, and then we provide.
Good afternoon, Minister. Alex from News 24. I'm just going to have to push for perhaps a more comprehensive answer as to what are the contributing factors to a almost 50% decrease in the fatalities and crashes. I understand that it might be difficult to quantify what has contributed to this, but I mean, I seem it highly impossible that over the case of just a single year, all of a sudden law enforcement is doing their job, at 300%, and drivers on the SA roads, which are historically lawless, have decided to obey the laws. So, I do think we need something a bit more comprehensive. Is it because there were less people on the roads due to the fact that Easter and school holidays were separated, perhaps the financial crunch people have faced? But it can't, I don't think it's a bit of both. It has to be one or the other. So I just would like something a bit more comprehensive as to why we saw this major decrease. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This brings us to the end of the questions. We now have the answers. CEO,
can you start with the technical questions? That's the Sisonke's questions, yeah.
Thank you, Minister, and the media. The issue of the Western Cape in terms of the 18 fatalities, the process to validate the fatalities, it's three-pronged. You then have the quick response form, which is taken from the AR form, because any accident in South Africa has to be reported in terms of the crash form with any police officer. That's one point of the data collection. The second issue you deal with in terms of the pathological services, those that are then removing the bodies from the crash scene before the docket of whether culpable homicide has been opened and all this. So our fatalities in relation to the Western Cape stands at 18. And this is a validated matter. The second issue, perhaps we need to dispel the myth that there have been less people on the road. Last year, Minister, we had 1.5 million of vehicles that went through our toll gate. This year we had 1.3 million. It's just a decrease of 9%. So it can never be that that reduction of the 9% or less, in actual fact, the numbers that were less of the vehicles that we never had on our road this year, it's 138,000, as opposed to the 1.5 million and the 1.3 that we had this year. But what fundamentally changed in terms of the law enforcement and the road safety activations and mobilization? We had a 365-year plan, which plan then begins to deal with the issues and the integration of all the law enforcement subs, medical services, our traffic law enforcement, focusing on the 50 hazardous spots which are now known in the country, which are the hazardous spots that we have in the country, and deploy the traffic law enforcement and the police on those spots which are known ordinarily as the hazardous spots. The minister has then alluded to the fact that the Minister of PPSA had waived the 30% threshold in terms of overtime. The limitation that ordinarily we have in terms of our traffic law enforcement, since they are employed in terms of the Public Service Act, they were then extended to work beyond the 8 hours. However, what we then did we then introduced a 3-shift system that then ensured, ordinarily it will be from 8 to 4. We broke those shifts and said, some of you will start working at 6 o'clock to 2 o'clock, others 2 o'clock to 10 o'clock, others 10 o'clock to 6 o'clock in the morning. But you do that in terms of the hazardous areas. But what also has assisted greatly, if you look in terms of the numbers, the NPA has come on board. They have now issued a circular. In particular, if you look in terms of drunken driving in the provinces, the Free State province is leading on those. If you are then caught on speeding in the Free State, the bail will not be less than 2,000. And what they have further done, Minister, there's a normal trend, there was a normal trend when people are caught on speeding, we are taken to a diversion program. The circular has been issued. Any matter that relates, any transgression that relates to speeding shall not be taken to a diversion program. We are now facing the consequences as an ordinary criminal or law enforcer. So that has also assisted that communication from the from NPA, as well as the enforcement, deployment of the law enforcement. And also, if you look in terms of those issues, you'll also see that the areas where we found lacking, SAPS has also deployed in those areas. Hence the reduction between pedestrians, motor vehicle, as well as other elements that we're dealing with.
Thank you, CEO. Minister?
Okay, I think that Advocate MCB also went somewhere to answer Alex's question. I think that Alex, maybe if I can just add and underline, I think it would be wrong for anyone to come out of here, I'm not saying that's what you intend doing, to say that the single explanation for the reduction in 2019 Easter fatalities is the separation of school holidays and the Easter weekend. Because that would be incorrect, frankly. Yes, that may have been a major contributor to that. But the other interventions that we've been talking about, from our own evidence, they are beginning to show a better impact. But let's say also the separation of the Easter weekend and the school holidays were the major determinant. That in itself is helpful because it tells us what we need to do going forward. That we actually we may have to engage the Department of Basic Education to say never again should we combine the two if we want to save lives. That in itself would be a helpful thing to actually know and to actually do. But to attribute it solely to that would actually not be appropriate, because it's not like, partly it would be like we are giving up, that we can never. I do believe actually that we can reduce fatalities, and I think this last Easter weekend is showing that there are certain things that are beginning to work. They may not have been responsible for 100% of the reduction, and we need to look closer and intensify those things. And that also, perhaps, let's also not be ungrateful, that there may be an increase in the number of road users who are beginning to get the message, of what needs to be done to actually improve behavior. So it's important that we look at it that way. Unfortunately, we can't just solely attribute it to one. It is a combination of factors, and we need to learn lessons. In particular, we need to learn lessons out of the 2019 Easter statistics, because they may be the ones that may give us much bigger insight as to what is it that actually needs to reduction. The fact of the matter is there was a reduction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of our media briefing. Lunch is served at the foyer next to the boardrooms. Thank you very much. Have a safe day home.
Thank you. Let's go and just have our quick meeting. I have to dash to Johannesburg. I was supposed to be there originally was supposed to be 10:30. No, 10:30. But now there was a justice cluster which I was talking about.
That's the something wrong with people are law abiding.
Yeah, that's what I said. Why are people be so unhappy about law abiding citizens?
No, they are hoping for a negative. Music camera will something in the
It's